Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, The Story Ain't Over. Today I'm bringing you my summer book haul because I am so excited for all the books that I'm going to read this summer and all the ones that I want to get to. I feel like a lot of the books on this list are ones that I've just suddenly become really excited about. I've heard about them from someone else, or I came across them in a strange way and decided to pick them up, or I've been eyeing them for a while. They've been recommended to me a long time before and I've finally gotten around to grabbing them. I will preface this by saying that not all of these are books that I've bought myself. Some of these were sent to me by publishers, and although it may seem like I only ever buy my books, I do want to make it clear that I do use my library a lot. I do borrow a lot of ebooks and audiobooks from my library, and I also get some free ebooks from my workplace because I work for a company that makes e-readers now. So this is not the only means of me reading books. I do often use my library, so I don't want you to feel like you need to be buying books to be engaging in your reading habits. Now, with all that said, I'm really excited to get into the books that I want to talk about today, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about our sponsor of today's video, which is BetterHelp. So I've talked about BetterHelp before. It's better, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp. So I know you may look at me and you think, oh, she's got it all together and she's a really happy person who's just doing her thing, posting videos about books and just having a good time. But really, I am not always this person. I am not always this bubbly or happy or fun. And I feel like many other people watching this video or in the world generally, I also struggle with things on the side. I just don't like to share it as much because it can be difficult to do that and bear your, difficult moments to the world. So a lot of times we just put on a happy face. But I think it's a very real reality that some of us are going through things that you just can't see. We might be having trouble sleeping. We might be going through some very difficult times in our lives. We might be struggling with a particular relationship in our lives. I definitely have long stretches of time where I'm putting on a brave face most of the time and I'm struggling with things on the inside. And most recently, I feel like I struggled a lot with leaving my previous job and, starting a new one. And I feel like I'm in a much better place now, but I was definitely having a rough time for a few months there. And so that's why I'm super excited to tell you about BetterHelp, today's sponsor, who wants to help you. BetterHelp offers therapists who are trained to listen and help you. There's a broad range of expertise that's available in BetterHelp's 20,000 therapist network that can give you access to help that you may not be able to get in your area. With BetterHelp, you can talk to a therapist in a private online environment that is safe and accessible for you. One thing I love about BetterHelp is just the ease of the service. All you need to do is go online and fill out a questionnaire that will help assess your specific needs. And then from there, you'll get matched to a therapist within 48 hours. From there, you'll be able to schedule video and phone sessions with your therapist. And on top of that, you can also share unlimited messages with your therapist as well. Everything you share will be completely confidential, so you can get your help with a peace of mind. And perhaps one of the best things about BetterHelp is that they're really committed to helping you find the best therapist for yourself. So if you feel like you're not connecting with your therapist, but you're too anxious to, make that switch, it's actually really easy on BetterHelp. You can request a new therapist at any time at no charge. And so it makes it really easy and really seamless to make sure that you find the therapist that's right for you. So with that said, I think a lot of times we can feel very alone in what we're going through, but BetterHelp really shows you that there's someone out there to listen to you. So you can join 2 million people who are taking charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. And of course, I would not bring you a sponsored mention without bringing you a discount code along with it. So you can get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/thisstoryaintover. So that's better, HELP.com/thisstoryaintover, which is just my channel name. I hope you guys will take advantage of this offer and get the help that you need. And now let's get into the books on this book haul. So first up, I have one of my most anticipated releases of this entire year, which is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is the third solo book by Emily Henry that I will be reading. Her first two books, Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation, are probably some of my absolute favorite romances ever. And this book actually features a literary agent and an editor who work in publishing, and it's their romance basically, but they also happen to be like rivals from what I can tell from the description. So overall, I'm really excited for this one because one, it's by one of my favorite authors, but also it's a really great concept, and also because I've already heard so many amazing things about it from a lot of people I trust, other book influencers who have read this. So yeah, I'm just super excited for this one. So if you want to know my thoughts on this, definitely go check out my channel. The next book that I have is By the Book by Jasmine Guillory, and I'm really excited for this one because it's a bit of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It follows our main character Isabel, who is a 25-year-old Black employee in publishing, and she is overworked and underpaid and basically underappreciated where she works. But when she overhears her boss complaining about a really high-profile author who is totally behind on delivering his long-awaited manuscript, she decides that she's going to use this opportunity to jumpstart her career and really get the recognition she deserves. And so the situation that ensues is that Isabel travels to the high-profile author's Santa Barbara mansion and decides to stay there and help make sure that he finishes his manuscript. But of course, he's a little bit of a beastly man, and this is where our Beauty and the Beast situation comes along. Cannot wait to read this one and get all those romancy Beauty and the Beast vibes, so just really excited for it. Alrighty, next I have a book that I've been meaning to read for years now and I never got around to it, and I was like, you know what, let me just grab the book now because a new adaptation of this has recently come out. And that book is The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger, and this book is basically about a man who has this genetic condition that makes him spontaneously like travel in time. And so every time he sort of disappears from his current location and appears in a different time with no clothes on, which I find very interesting, and he's sort of forced to figure out, you know, where he is and try to find a way back. And while that is part of the story, the other part of the story is that he has a wife in, well, the later parts of his life, and they've sort of fallen in love in a very strange way because she has met him when she was very young, whereas he sort of meets her later in life and has traveled back in time and accidentally appeared in her life, basically. And so this book, I only know about it because I watched the old adaptation from the early 2000s, which I know a lot of people hate, but I personally actually kind of loved. But I do recognize that it's not like the best movie. I just love the concept, I guess. But I know a lot of people have criticized this book and the movie for sort of the grooming aspect of the relationship. So I'm curious to see if that's like really strong in the book or if like the movie is worse. But what's also interesting about this situation is that there's another adaptation for this book in the form of a TV show that has recently come out, and it actually features an actress from Game of Thrones and also the actor who played Thor in Divergent, which is Theo James. I recently watched another show with him in it, which is Sanditon, and loved it, and so I kind of need more of him. So that's why I'm really excited to watch the show, but I'm also really curious to see how it's going to match up to the book. So excited to pick this one up because I feel like it's a book that a lot of people love and talk about, and it was so popular when I was younger, and I just want to see what the hype is about, and I also want to see how it's going to match up with the show. So if you've read the book or if you've watched the new show, definitely let me know what you think of either of them because I'm just so curious to hear more. Alrighty, the next 10 or so books might be a little bit familiar if you watched my recent video where I recommend a bunch of books by South Asian authors, so definitely go check that out if you haven't watched it yet. But a lot of those books were ones that I bought recently and that I'm so excited to pick up soon, and a lot of these were actually recommended to me by like other South Asian people, so I'm really excited to read them. So the first book I have is by a Tamil Sri Lankan author, which is The Story of a Brief Marriage by Arunprasam, and I've actually talked about this author before. He also has a book called A Passage North. I think I hauled this in my last haul, and this book in particular follows a couple who ends up in this arranged marriage in the middle of Sri Lanka's civil war. Next, I have 5 books by the same author, and that is Shyam Salvadore, and this was actually recommended to me by one of my Tamil friends in real life. So this is his first book, Funny Boy, and the author is actually queer as well, which was very exciting to me because I love hearing about South Asian authors of varying gender identities and also sexualities. So his debut book was this one, Funny Boy, and it's a bit of a coming-of-age novel about this queer boy. He is the second son of a privileged Sri Lankan family, and it sort of just follows his life and his relationships with his family and love, and it's a coming-of-age novel, and it was also written 25 years ago. So I'm going to go into it aware that it was written quite a while ago, but I'm really curious to see how this one goes. The next book by him is Cinnamon Gardens, and this one follows a school teacher in 1920s Ceylon, which is basically at the end of colonial rule. And I'm so excited for this situation because I personally love books that deal with colonialism and like the after effects of it. So I'm really excited for this one, and I do believe that there's an aspect of feminism in this book and sort of how the main character is only given very few options and how she has to deal with that. The next book by this author is Swimming in the Monsoon Sea, and I believe this one's a bit more of a YA, I think. It follows a 14-year-old main character, and it's set in 1980 in Sri Lanka in the monsoon season. This book is loosely inspired by Shakespeare's Othello, and the sort of inciting incident of this book is when our main character Amrit is faced with the arrival of his cousin from Canada, and he finds himself having feelings that he's never felt before. Alright, this next book by Shyam Salvadore is so interesting to me. This book is called The Hungry Ghost, and it deals with the concept where in Buddhist mythology, the dead can be reborn as hungry ghosts. They are spirits with stomachs so large that they can never be full, and the reason for that is because they've desired too much during their lifetime. And so it's the duty of the living whose loved ones have been doomed to this fate by doing kind deeds and creating good karma. And so this book follows two characters, our Sri Lankan matriarch, who is our hungry ghost, who has longed and desired for, money and wealth and land and just all of these things. And then she has a grandson who is actually alive named Shivan, who is this gay man living in Sri Lanka, and he is forced to find a way to help his grandmother. I think this one's going to be super, super interesting, and I just love this concept of like crossing the line between fantasy and reality, so I'm really excited to see how this one goes. And then the final book by this author is his newest release, which is Mansions of the Moon. And this one seems super interesting to me. It's set in ancient India in the 6th century BC, and it follows the extraordinary life of Yasodhara, who is the woman who married the Buddha. I love that this one is set over the course of her life and sort of gives you a long look at it, and I'm also really interested in the fact that it's set in like ancient India, so I'm really curious to see how that setting is going to come along. Alrighty, next I have a couple books also by another South Asian author, and these are part of the same series. And I've actually read both of them before, but I'm really excited to reread them because it's been quite a few years since I first read them. So those books are The 20th Wife and The Feast of Roses by Indu Sundaresan. And these books follow one of the most controversial empresses from the Mughal Empire. So this is a period in Indian history, and I'm so excited to reread these again because I remember having so much fun with them when I first read them. They are filled with drama and all this court intrigue and really lush descriptions of the outfits and the food and the location as well, and I feel like it just transports you to that time. If you are a fan of the movie Jodha Akbar, which is also set in the Mughal Empire time period, then you'll definitely like these books. Alrighty, this next book is a bit of a genre-bending, contemporary, coming-of-age story, and it was actually recommended by one of my favorite authors, which is Roshni Chakshi. She posted about this book in her Instagram stories one day, and I screenshotted it, and I was like, oh my god, I need to get this book at some point, and I finally got around to buying it, and that book is Gold Diggers by Sanjana Satyan, and this is set in our modern day in the Atlanta suburbs, and it's a bit of a coming-of-age story that deals with the American dream and also what it means to be Asian American or South Asian American. It follows our main character Neil, who lives in the Atlanta suburbs, and he's a second generation teenager and is dealing with the expectations of his Asian American enclave, but all he really wants is his neighbor Anita. And so Anita is actually the beneficiary of this ancient alchemic potion made from stolen gold. It's a lemonade that harnesses the ambition of the gold's owner. And so when Neil finds out that Anita has this potion, he sees it as his, ticket to getting everything he wanted and also living up to his family and community's expectations. But this book sort of takes two timelines, and so something happens to sort of rip their community apart, and we follow Neil years later in the Bay Area where he is again met with this sense of disappointment and, unfulfillment, and so he considers taking the potion again. I think this concept is so unique, and I'm so intrigued by the whole magical realist aspect of it, so I cannot wait to pick this one up. If you have read this book, let me know what you thought of it, because I just want to know more. Alrighty, this next book is one that I didn't ever think I would buy, but recently I had a few people tell me that it's actually a really good book. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try, because the concept itself doesn't seem like anything I would like and is usually the type of thing that I would steer clear from. But that book is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and this one is a book that, from what I know, is basically like a Lolita vibe. It involves a naive younger woman being sort of groomed by this older man, and there's like a weird power dynamic. The inside cover says that it explores the psychological dynamics of the relationship between a precocious yet naive teenage girl and her magnetic and manipulative teacher. So I know like Lolita, it's like this weird romance-ish situation, but I believe that this one is not like romanticizing it. It's like actually taking like a stark and honest portrayal of this. And this one actually takes like two different timelines. So the original timeline when she's sort of dealing with this teacher and in this sort of relationship, and then like 17 years later when these allegations are coming up against various people and also I think the man that she was with, and she has this moment where she can either stay silent or actually speak up and sort of come to terms with what happened years ago. So overall I think this is going to be really interesting, and I'm glad that I decided to give this a second chance, because I feel like when I first heard about it I was like, oh no, I would never want to read that, but I guess I just didn't look into the concept very deeply. I was just like, oh, Lolita vibes, I don't want that. So that's where we're at. But if you've read this book, let me know what you thought of it. I'm really, really intrigued by it. On a similar note, I recently bought a memoir that I recently read and absolutely loved and thought was so thought-provoking and powerful. And that book is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a book written by the sexual assault survivor in the Stanford case, the People versus Brock Turner. And this is her, this is Chanel Miller. And she was sort of anonymous throughout the entire case and then decided to break her anonymity afterwards with this book. And this was such a powerful, powerful memoir. Just reading from her perspective and like the whole situation of going through that case and everything that happened to her was so interesting, but also very harrowing, but also needed to be said. And I loved every moment of this. This book is also really well written. She's an amazing writer in her own right, aside from the subject matter that she was talking about. So yeah, it was overall just an incredible book. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. And I'm so glad that she decided to bring the story forward. And so many survivors got to see like their story told. Alrighty, next I have a bit of a genre-bending sci-fi fantasy that is actually a Reading Color book club pick for July, I believe, and that is Rosewater by Tade Thompson. I mentioned this in the announcement video for our Reading Color book club. If you didn't know, I have a book club called the Reading Color book club where we read a book by a BIPOC author each month. And so our book of the month for July is Rosewater. I did not have a copy of this book before, and so I recently went out and got it because July is coming up soon. All I know about this one is that it's an award-winning sci-fi fantasy novel. I've heard amazing things about it. I know nothing about the plot though, and I believe it deals with like a bit of a horrifying future, which I always love, and I've been meaning to pick up more sci-fi, so I'm just really excited for this one. This next book is one that I'm not sure I'm gonna love, but I want to try it out, and that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that has been popular for many years now. It was super popular a few years back, and from what I know, I think this is set in like a post-apocalyptic version of our world. Like it's set far in the future after the collapse of society and the environment. And it follows the lives of like 5 different people, and it sort of jumps, you know, back and forth in time. So you're getting, you know, the collapse of civilization and then like many years later after there's nothing left. And I believe many of the characters are also actors, like Shakespearean actors, which I find interesting. And the book also considers the idea of fame as well. I don't know how, but that's what the back of the book says. It's a very vague description, and I feel like this is one of those books that I just need to go into it without knowing much, and I'll be quite surprised. So I'm excited to pick this up. I don't know if I'm gonna love it, but I want to try it out. Alrighty, and then the final book that I picked up recently that I'm also not sure I'm gonna love is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a book that's been really, really, really popular on TikTok, and it recently got a traditional book publishing deal as well, because this was originally a self-published book by the author. But basically what I know about this one is that it takes a perspective of one of Dracula's brides. So it takes that concept. She's one of these women that Dracula has taken and, you know, made his brides, and she is also a vampire, I think, or made to be a vampire, or just a food source, maybe. I'm not sure. But it's told from her perspective, like in the first person. And it's a very, very short book. It's about 200 pages. And it sort of deals with this idea of like obsession as well, which I find fascinating. So based on what people have said about this, I'm excited to pick it up, but I am not going to keep my expectations very high because I feel like I've been burned by TikTok recommendations before. And with that said, those are all the books that I wanted to haul today. I'm so excited for so many of these books. There's just so many great ones that I've been meaning to read for a while, or authors I've been meaning to pick up for a long time that I just cannot wait to get to. So I feel like I'm gonna have a really great time reading this summer, and I feel like this year has been one of my best reading years ever. Like I found so many new favorites already that I'm just so excited for what the rest of the year is gonna bring. As always, I would love to hear from you guys if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. I always love hearing your thoughts on books. And thank you once again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. You guys should definitely take advantage of the offer down below. Get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp using the link in my description. So BetterHelp, HELP.com/thisstoryaintover. It's just my channel name. Use that link and get 10% off your first month and start getting the help that you need. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Go check out my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and TikTok if you want to get regular updates on my reading and life. And I will see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!